Is just hello everybody and welcome to our session today. As always, we would like to ask everyone to mute their mics on entry so that our speaker can be heard. If you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask in the chat, and both Susie and myself will monitor the chat and ask questions at the end of the session. Please listen to the presentation first, and then we'll get to your questions later. As always, industry experts are welcomed, but we are a completely free platform, so we do not make any suggestions about purchasing goods or services. Please do not mention names of children or schools if you have a question or a comment. And please remember that we are all in this together. And while we offer advice, we would always suggest that you go to your school principal or centre manager first to seek guidance and advice there before taking any guidance externally. And today, I am your host, Catherine from Incluzun.com, and Miss Susie, the wonderful lead counsellor for GEMS. And we are joined today by Dr. Rekha Barthlemy, and I will hand over for our session on addiction.
So let me present Dr. Rekha. Dr. Rekha is from France, and she's done her studies in France and in America, and she's a neuropsychologist and quite well established here, and very, very nice and very approachable. She was kind enough to give us this amazing talk. I approached her in November to have this, because seeing the amount of difficulties that we're having, not only the screen addiction, but also all kind of different addiction. Dr. Rekha has really found a way to explain very simply what's our job and how to understand these teenagers and what they're going through. Dr. Rekha is working at Semedip with quite a good team of other specialists there. So it's a very good clinic to look up for. If there is to add on to our list of counselors, definitely. So please, without further ado, I will leave to Dr. Rekha to speak about Addiction 101. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm going to now share my screen so you can see the full PowerPoint. Can you see it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just start right away, and I will try my best to make you understand how addiction is working first and why teens are so vulnerable. So we're going to start with definition, so we can have a proper definition of what is addiction. Then we're going to have a look of what's addiction on the physiology, what causes the brain changes, and what type of effect that we have in teens. And then we're going to take a look of what we can do and how we can manage when we're facing a teen addiction. So first, with definition, what is addiction? If we take a look of the definition given by the National Institute of Health in USA, you will see that they're defining addiction as a chronic relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite harmful consequences. In this definition, you can see that it is right on that it is a relapsing brain disease, meaning that is causing several times you will face the same difficulty in stopping the usage of the substance. But you see here that there is no definition. In this definition, there is no mention of any behavior or any material. It's because for a long time it was very much centralized and focused on drugs and substance, but not on all behavior. Why? It's because it is difficult in a research way to understand the pathways and the biology underpinnings with behaviors or material. So when I'm talking about material, I'm talking about phone, computer, internet in general, social media, but also, for example, food, or other type of behavior. So for a long time, addiction was only related to substance and specifically to drug. But it's not just that, because there is other things that can trigger to addiction. In the last version of the DSM, so the diagnosis and statistical manual that is used by most of the psychiatrists and psychologists to have a proper definition of each disorder. Now we have a new kind of disorder that is described in this manual. So before, in the DSM-4, it was substance-related disorder. Now it's substance-related and addictive disorder, which include a lot of things, and mostly 10 separate classes of drugs, which going from alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, but also other type of substance such as hallucinogens, stimulants, and we will see later what type of stimulants, opioid, etc. And just in the last version, they had added gambling, which is start to be a recognized addiction behavior, and that's explaining, because it has been researched, that explaining how this addiction is starting and why gambling can also be a behavior that is triggered to addiction. So there is two types of substance-related disorder in the DSM-5. First is substance use disorder, also known as SUD. That is describing all the patterns of symptoms resulting from an uncontrolled use of a substance despite harmful consequence. Okay, so it's really important to have this name, these words that is highlight uncontrolled use. That means the person is completely losing control, and it's despite harmful consequences. So despite all the consequences, all the risk, all the problem that will be caused by this usage. And the second substance-related disorder is substance-induced disorder, which will be the consequences of the substance itself. So the intoxication, the residual effect, and we will see what is residual effect, and all the mental or psychological or medical consequence that will follow this use of substance. So as you understand, most of the definition are circling around what is usage of substance and thinking about drugs, but not only. So we will focus today on that because it's difficult to have a proper research on behavior such as gaming, social media, usage of phone, even though there is several teams around the world trying to highlight how it's working and how we can make a difference between what is a normal usage and what is an addictive usage, and how we can make we can distinguish what is addiction, what is just dependence, and what is just overusing. So regarding the manifestation of what is an addiction, you will have what when there is a proper SUD, you will have an intense focus on using a certain substance, okay, to the point where there is the person that is using this substance will have no more ability to function in a day-to-day life normally. This day-to-day life will become impaired, which means that the life, the interpersonal relationship and everything will just be focused on the usage of the drug. So that will cause different type of things that will completely change the way that the person is being on an everyday basis. And this is actually one of the signs that you will have at first to think that maybe there is something that is going on. So the person will keep using the substance even if they know that it is causing and will cause problems. That means on your medical health or on other type of problems such as social. So impaired control will push the person to crave and have a strong urge to use the substance no matter what, where, no matter what, when it is, and they will just try to find this substance. This is exactly what we see on very heavy drug abuser. They will just seek the substance no matter what. And this impaired control, the thing that they cannot control anymore, the way that they take in the substance, will slowly cause social problems that will failure to complete major tasks such as work, but also school, home, household things, so leisure's activity will be slowly given up or cut back because of the substance, because the substance will take so much place in the life of the person that it will be difficult for them to stay focused on those things, and then it will be only focused on the substance. And this will also cause risky use, because the craving, the strong use of the usage of substance will lead, unfortunately, the person to try to get, despite the setting, to try to obtain the substance and use it. And of course, this intense focus, the craving that will just continue to get the input of the substance, will slowly build a drug effect, such as tolerance and withdrawal symptoms that I will develop a bit later on this presentation. So, as you understand, SUD is mainly about getting the focus only on the substance and then try to obtain it whenever, whenever. And despite all the problem that the person knows that he will have, and the difficulty that will be encounters later on the usage. So that will cause, obviously, physical and psychological damage that will be difficult to reverse, but not impossible. So as you see, it's a very chronic thing that you start with the first experiment, and then you will repeat the experiment because of this pathway, of the reward pathway that I will explain later. And then this experiment will become an abuse, and the abuse will become a dependence, and this dependence will go to addiction. So we're talking about addiction when exactly the person has completely lose control of the intakes and cannot control anymore, and it's not even for just the pleasure, it's more essential than that. It's not just for having the high, it's not just for having the pleasure, it's because without it, it's not possible to live properly. So you will see in people with a substance use disorder, distorted thinking and behavior, intense cravings for the substance, but sometimes for other type of stuff. And also changes in personality, sometimes abnormal movement, or also other type of behavior that are not really common and that are not common to this person especially. So let's talk about now why actually this is causing all those damage, and why finally taking one substance one day, having one experience, can lead you to have a whole addiction that is difficult to tackle. It is all about the reward pathway. It's all about the reward pathway. This pathway is normally built to be triggered when we are doing something that is pleasant. So if you have an activity that you like a type of food, each time that you will use this and you will use the food, you will have the activity, the behavior, whatever, you will have a pleasure that is completely done by the reward pathway. And this pathway was first used to have to help pursue activities that will help us survive. But by the time of evolution, this became a pathway that is also associated to pleasure in general. So what's going to happen is that when you're going to have a stimulus that is entering the brain, that will stimulate certain specific brain receptors. Okay, so each substance, each behavior will have a specific brain receptor that will be stimulate each time that the input is coming in the brain. And this brain receptor will release the chemicals that are associated with pleasure that we all know as dopamine. So at the moment when you will have the stimulus, you will have the input of the substance or the behavior, you will indirectly release a lot of dopamine in the brain. But the difference between the normal pathway when you getting getting used when you have a behavior, a normal behavior, you have a good food, you have a pleasant activity, it's just like now is getting 2 to 10 times higher than the natural amount that will be released. So when you're putting a specific drug or substance that is not normal, that is not used in the brain, that will just trigger a lot of dopamine and a lot of release of this chemical that will be unusual for the brain. But the brain will like it because dopamine is so important for the brain overall functioning. Is involved in a lot of things such as action, motivation. Everything is indirectly related to dopamine. So when the dopamine will be released 10 times higher than the natural amount, it will be just flowed around the brain, which will cause the brain to really like it. And then what's going to happen is that this high that is an intoxication, this feeling of high, this feeling of really good pleasure, a lot of pleasure, will indirectly cause a memorization of this rapid satisfaction. So the brain will receive this load of dopamine and will memorize that this is how I can have the amount of dopamine I can have, and this is created by this stimulus. So, of course, the brain will just seek for the same input to have the same amount of dopamine. So it will create a conditioned response in the brain that will be memorized, and the brain will just try again and again to have the same amount of dopamine, to have the same amount of pleasure. And then because of that, indirectly, that will lead one to repeat the use of the same substance or the same behavior. So we will repeat the action to obtain the same pleasure, which will cause, again, the same circuit to be, the same pathway to be used. So it's all about the reward pathway. If somebody has a difficulty to stop a usage of a drug or a substance or a behavior, it will be because this is creating so much pleasure in the brain that is so unusual and so not possible to attain in a natural way that it will be difficult for him to stop it and inhibit the action because this dopamine will be so high and so important that the brain will just want it to have that as the same pleasure and the same input again and again. So what's going to happen is that the drug will hijack actually this pathway and take control of it, which will only lead to seek for the same pleasure and same usage. But what's going to happen next is that first you will try to have the usage, and then this usage will not give you the same amount of pleasure because you will get used to it. The body will start to adapt to this amount of input, and because of this adaptation, the response to the drug will not be as high, as intense as the first time. So this is what we call tolerance, and this tolerance will indirectly lead you to have more of this substance. Okay, so first we start with a specific amount, then this amount is not enough and you're building tolerance because the body is adapting to this, and then you will try to have more, to have the same amount as the first experiment. And this will only just grow and grow and grow until you will try to stop it. And when you will try to stop it, to just stop the use of the substance or the behavior, you will just have negative side effects. And those negative side effects is what we call residual effects. So actually, at this moment, you will not just don't feel the high. You will feel bad. You will feel not normal. You will feel sick. And it's because of this residual effect. And actually, what's going to happen is that you just will start thinking about this thing that was so good, so pleasant, and it will just. This is exactly at the moment that the control is not. There is no more control, and this is also at this moment that there is this huge seeking and this craving for the substance. So, as you understand, those things will the first use will just trigger a body to adapt, but in brain that will trigger physical change and rewiring for the brain to be only prioritize what is the pleasure, and this pleasure will go around this substance because this is what the brain has memorized as the best pleasure that it can have. And this is also why we see that sometimes drug users are jumping from one drug to another, because at first they had that, then the residual effect is getting in the scene, and then they're trying to have another type of high, so they try a new drug that will cause the first, again, the same high and the same pleasure, and etc. So when you have the combination of this increase of tolerance and the residual effects, you will have actually this is the problem when the addiction will really start. So what we need to understand is why in teens it's so vulnerable, why teens are so exposed, and it's so important, like it's so dangerous for them. The thing is that in adolescents, at teenagers, the dopamine levels are only baseline. So they are not really high, they are not really low, they are really just baseline, which means that this is exactly why we see in teens that they are constant boredom, they won't try new things, and they will try things like are risky, they will try sport outdoor that are risky, they will do things that are different. It's because they don't have a lot of dopamine. But each time that you're doing something that is very pleasant, very new, that will release dopamine, and that will trigger a lot of release around the brain. And actually, when they will try something new, it will actually be even much higher than if an adult is starting the same thing. So, two persons starting the same new thing. One is a teen, one is an adult. The adult will not have as much pleasure and as much dopamine as the teen. This is why actually when they try a substance and they try a behavior, the effect that are underlying that and will be actually because of the dopamine release, and the higher the dopamine, the newer the thing is, the higher the dopamine release is, the higher the exposition and the vulnerability is. So why? It's because at first, before the preteen years, you will have just a growth of prefrontal cortex. So from the childhood until the teenager, you will have a bit of growth related to in the brain, and especially in the prefrontal cortex. This prefrontal cortex is the area that is involved in decision making, judgment, etc. And this is exactly why you can make a 10 years old person, 10 years old child start thinking about math differently than a 6 years old, because actually this area has growth, and then it's easier for them to learn this type of reasoning. And this and after this preteen years, so you will have a big growth, and then you will have a reduction of the growth. That means that at this point, the prefrontal cortex is less active and it's not growing as much. And so until the young adulthood, it will not be as effective, as growing, as active as it was in the preteen years. And this will that will limit and indirectly the ability to make thoughtful and responsible decisions. And this is exactly why teenage years are so hectic sometimes, because there is not a lot of good decisions that are taken. And sometimes you can have bad decisions, but it's not really intensely intend to have risky behavior or something like that. It's just because the brain is just telling them indirectly that the consequences are not that not important and not necessarily matter as much as it would be in an adult brain. So indirectly, it's just like the brain is telling them, okay, I like that, I really like that, it will give me a lot of pleasure. And why? It's not that much important, because the prefrontal cortex is not as much active, so it's not as much giving a lot. It's not giving a lot of judgment, and if you take that, you combine the repeated substance use that will already kind of changing the brain wiring, and then you will have the fact, you take the fact that the teens are already prone to prone to adventure, trying to risk-taking, to new things, and they don't have like the ability, the physiological ability to take the best decision. You have the perfect combination to have a big vulnerability and to be as in danger as teen are. So you have the perfect recipe for an addiction in future. And this is exactly why it is important to understand that in teens, it is very, the vulnerability is very high, but it has a lot of consequences. Why exactly? Because of course, as if you put a drug in the brain that is growing, you will have a lot of rewiring that will happen, and the substance use will just develop tolerance, as I explained earlier, and to achieve the same effect as the first experiment. But this overstimulation of the reward circuit, the overstimulation of the dopamine release will cause the brain to change. The brain will adjust, the brain will adapt, but that is not the plan. It is not as planned as it was supposed to be planned. So it will be that will cause dramatic changes in the brain's neurons and the brain circuit that will have consequences on the development, on the growth of each cognitive function, but also in other type of stuff such as medical way. That all the thing that the brain is actually guiding. So we see that we can say that there is an increased risk of early substance use disorder much more quickly than in adults. So if you take two people, one adult and one teen, they're trying the same amount of drugs, the same amount of the substance, and the damage will be much higher in the teen than in the adult, and the consequences are even much deeper. It is important to understand that this also will have an effect on the way that they will be later. So we know that now 9 on 10 people with substance addiction first begins before 18, and we know that the younger you start, the bigger is the risk to develop a severe SUD. If you try before the 15, you will have 6 times you are 6 times higher likely to develop a very important SUD. And if you start before 13, the risk is at 47% than if you start at 17. So the younger you start, the higher is the risk. And of course, this will put a very important imprint in the brain because it's not fully developed at the moment. It's not developed until 25, and this will cause a rewiring that is not as it was planned. It's supposed to be planned. So this is why it is so important to to have that in mind, to understand how important and difficult vulnerability how vulnerable teens are. And it's not just only about bad decision, or it's not about just being, I would say, exposed to the substance. It's also because there is also other factors, and sometimes the result of a combination of factors. So, for example, genetic can be an explanation. Some people are more likely to develop addiction because of the genetics. Parental influence, if the parent has an addiction, for example, it's an addiction to some medication, and the behavior in general. The home environment, is it a safe place where things are told? The social influence, if you are in a group of friends that are trying risky things and maybe are using drug already, you will be more exposed and you are more likely to try it. And of course, the psychological condition. If the person is in a bad condition emotionally and is feeling a bit low, it will be of course easier for him to try something that is new and that are sell as something that is relief, that can give you a relief on the pain and everything. So it's not just about poor decision. Poor decision is a thing because of, as I said, of the prefrontal cortex that is not as active as in other part of the life. But it's also because of a combination of other factors, such as environmental factors and also genetics, that are important to take in consideration. So what we can do when facing an addiction in teens, or when we have a doubt that there is an addiction. First, it's important to understand which type of substance is the most used. Usually, all around the globe, all around the world, the most frequently used substance in teens is alcohol. Alcohol, because it's easy to get to. A lot of family has alcohol at home, which is easy to have by hand. So it's easy to get to that. And then you have tobacco and cannabis, but also other type of things such as cough medicine, tranquilizer, and ADHD drugs, such as Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, etc. What is very a trend right now is vaping. So vaping is really the trend because it starts being marketed as something that is not that bad for health, because at first it was designed to replace cigarettes. So it was marketed as something that is good for health, because actually it's supposed to replace something that is addictive, such as a cigarette. And what happened is that, so you know that vaping is, you put, there is a little substance in the vapor, and then it's getting vaporized. It's getting released as a vapor, and you inhalate and exhalate the aerosol, that will create a sensation. It is getting a lot of popularity because it's easy to have, it's easy to buy. You can have it wherever you go, in malls. It's easy to have, and it's not marketed as a bad thing yet, unfortunately. And you will see that in the late days, the usage of e-cigarettes or vaping products in general have been doubled in 4 years, and these data are not as recent as I would like it to do, because it's already 2022. So we can expect that it's even higher now, and that the usage of e-cigarettes and vaping in general, it's very much higher now. it's important to understand that it's not only nicotine and cannabis that can be vape, it's also alcohol. So you can also put alcohol in this thing. The problem is that in this e-liquid, e-juice, as they call it, there is nicotine first, but there are also other type of chemicals that when they are getting hit, is really toxic for the brain, because it's trigger a lot of connection that are not supposed to happen, and release of hormones that are not supposed to happen. And in adolescence, what's going to happen is that, of course, when you're using nicotine and you're using nicotine in this way as vaping, because it's getting faster and higher and in more intensity in the neurons, you will have interference on the brain development in some key area, such as the prefrontal cortex, which, as I said earlier, is responsible for decision-making, judgment, planning, reasoning, and everything. So using nicotine already as a cigarette, it's already impairing the cortex. But when you use it as vaping, it will trigger even more changes, because it's getting faster, higher, and more intense in the neurons. It's the same thing for THC, so cannabis, because it's more powerful when you are using it in vaping than in smoking. And why? Is because it's getting, as I said, faster, stronger, and will trigger higher blood concentration of the chemical in the neurons. And this will cause impairment in specific brain area that are involved in different types of functions, such as memory, motivation, appetite, stress, but also emotion and anxiety. And this is why actually cannabis at first is causing some side effects, such as hallucination and everything. But when vaping, it's getting higher, and it's getting a loss of it's also getting consequences on the long term, such as memory. And it has been already proven in research that the usage of cannabis has consequences in long-term functioning, in the brain functioning. And 37 years after, you can still have loss of memory and difficulty to memorize and everything, and this type of things in the brain functioning. So it really has a very serious consequence. I wanted to have a word on ADDIS, ADHD medication, because it's very common to have it by a friend that has this on prescription by a doctor, because it has actually ADHD. So the thing is that it's a psychostimulant, so it will give a lot of the psychostimulation will just trigger a lot of brain awareness, so it can give the impression to be very aware, to be very focused. And it's usually found in students that will seek higher school performances, that will want to have better grades and everything. And the thing is that because it's really easy to have it, because a friend of me has a prescription, it's easy to have it and to just take it quickly. But it's also dangerous, because at first, as a medication for ADHD, it's already triggering dopamine pathway. And when you take it and you're not supposed to take it, it's getting even higher than in a person with ADHD. So it's very important to keep that in mind. But it's also important to keep that even the person that will have ADHD, if he's not taking the medication properly, he's taking the medication in the wrong way, taking more the dose that he's supposed to take, that can also cause addiction, but that can also cause a big damage in the brain. So it's really dangerous, and it has to be very carefully watched. So we'll say in UAE, we are not that much exposed to drug. So I was taking a look of this survey, and you see that in UAE, young girls don't feel like it's that easy to have drugs in their country. So only 32% will say it's easy to get drugs in my country, compared to other countries such as the Levant region, where it's completely doubled. They feel like it's really easy to get the hand on drugs. But there is other type of problem, and it's not only cannabis and opioid and etc. that can be a problem of substance abuse. It also can be other types of substance, as I mentioned earlier, such as medication. And actually, in UAE, if you take a look of what are the most used substance, it's actually pharmaceutical opioid, such as tramadol, which can be prescribed in specific condition, but can still be used easily because it's in pharmacy. And so it seems like it's one of the higher substance that is used in the UAE. But there is also other type of things. For example, in this study, you can see that they were trying to find expatriate how they will what they are doing, and you see that here they reveal that actually self-medication is what is the most used in expatriate teens, and they just found it normal. Because of course, if you just open your pharmaceutical box at home and you feel you see a couple of medication is associated to good things. So it's easy to go there and try it once and then try it again. And one of the medication that is really much used as a drug and is already a lot of that is already exposed on social media is cough syrup. So it's so easy to go to the pharmaceutical and go to, I have a cough, I need a cough, I need a cough syrup. And actually, this is that can, if it's used at a higher dosage, that can give you a real high, as much high as the cannabis. So this is something that is also to be aware of. That it's not just classic drugs that we can think about in Western countries. It's not just opioid, ecstasy, and everything. It's also other type of substance that can be really easy to get on hand, such as medicine and medication. So at school, what's gonna happen? What can we do at school? When there is a teen that might have a problem, substance abuse, or even an addiction. First, we need to understand the major step toward recovery. The first one will be the recognition of the problem. And then we need to have a formal assessment of the symptoms. If there is medical damage, what is exactly, where are we exactly? Are we already in a substance use disorder, or we are just in a dependence? We are just in the very first step, the very first moment of the addiction. If so, then there is multiple type of intervention that can be used. Usually, it's a combination of medication that will be there to cut symptoms, so cut the residual side effects. And the other part will be therapy, such as psychotherapy, but not only, as a combination. And there is also other type of thing that can be done. Is a unique recovery plan that will be just for this person, and that will include strategy outside of the formal treatment, such as residential treatment, therapeutic communities, multi-head groups, and so on. So the pathway from the problem to the recovery will be to have a step-by-step trying to identify, then try to find a solution and help. So this is exactly what a school can be. The first thing to do is to identify, are we in a problem? Is it something that is a problem, or is just normal? And we have to seek for signs, physical signs, such as bloodshot eyes, nosebleeds that are uncommon, change in appetite or sleep patterns. So the student is arriving every morning very sleepy. That is not normal. This is not how we used to see him, and there is no other option, no other explanation for that. Change in weight, for example, gain or loss of weight that is really sudden, that cannot be explained by something else, can be a sign. Also, seizure that happen suddenly and never happened before, that also can be a sign. And also other type of behavior, like physical, like impaired coordination, shakes, tremors, slurred speech. All those signs can be signs of substance abuse. Behavioral signs, for example, declining grades or skipping class, trouble at school, things that was not happening before, poor attendance or poor performance, loss of interest in extracurricular activity. This is a very important sign, because usually when they're trying to do extracurricular activities, that is something that they're supposed to love very much. And so if you're starting losing interest in this activity, that can be a very important sign that there is something wrong. A complaint from teacher, missing variables. You heard about difficulty at home with family's member, changing friends. I have a new group of friends that is completely not the usual one, and other type of things, such as using eye drops to hide bloodshot eyes, or using a lot of perfume to hide a smell. This is small signs that can still be signs, and altogether, of course, can lead to think that maybe there is a problem. And also psychological signs, such as sudden change in personality and attitude, mood swings, irritability at home, but also at school, unusual hyperactivity, hesitation, and a lot of lack of motivation. So, for example, you have a student that was really involved in his studies, going to class normally, have good grades, and suddenly no motivation, etc. That can also be a sign of substance abuse. So yes, so first is identify. And it is important to understand the difference between a substance abuse and an addiction, because addiction is when there is no longer the control. There is the person has crosses a line between having control and trying to take the drug to have fun, to get high. Is not anymore about having fun and getting high. It's completely a dependence. The person depend on it, and having the substance is essential. It's very much essential for the person to feel okay, to just feel okay. So an addictive person will have physical and psychological addiction, and there will not be a choice to take the substance. It will just be a need. So this is exactly when you switch from an abuse to an addiction. It's when it's not anymore a choice. It's a need to take the substance to just feel okay. So yeah. So then when you identify, you can discuss, listen, and educate. This is the second step. First, of course, it's better to have a discussion than a confrontation. For example, with several teachers, it's better to start a conversation, to start a discussion, and understand what's happening. But it's also to understand the reason that they try the substance at the first place. Is it because there is an emotional stress? Is it because they want to feel more in control of something, or they want to feel more connected to their friend? So it is important because, as you see in this survey, most of the time they think that young people start drugs because of encouragement from friends, and social network. So usually it's because of influence from the friends. And secondly, it will be stress relief and boredom, as you can see. And depends on the country and also on the society, a lack of entertainment option. So also drug can be started just because you feel bored and you feel like you don't have any entertainment, so you will just try this one. So it is important to understand why at first. So if you understand why at first, you can have an impact on that. You can see what's next. And so if you understand what is the why, you can also help them learn new ways to feel better. If they did that to have entertainment, if they did that to stress relief, to have a really an emotional improvement, you can help them understand that they can feel better in another way by building good habits, for example, and try to deal with stress and loneliness in another way. Maybe participate in sport and creative pursuits that are possible at school. For example, you have workshop for, I don't know, craft. Maybe that can be something that is suitable for the student. But also one-on-one encounter to discuss, express the feeling, and understand that is okay. That is actually helpful to talk about what I'm feeling. That is also something that can be helpful. And of course, educate about the substance use risk and impact, because most of the young teens, they think that because they are young and they are the life in front of them, they can just do it and that will not be a big damage. And actually, that's not really true, because we see that actually this is completely the opposite. The more young, the younger you are, the more important the risk is, and the bigger is the consequences on the long-term effects. So actually, they need to understand that they are not invisible despite being young, and understand that the earlier exposure consequences can be really extreme, and not only for 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, but for a whole adulthood. And this is not what they want. Actually, we hope. So then the thing that we need to do is to refer to medical assistants for the general practitioner, family medicine, whenever the family is using as medical advice. That is important to get referral to them, because they need to have a proper assessment, I was saying earlier, to assess where are the damage, do we have damage, where are we in the process, are we already in an addiction, or are we are we just in a few steps, the first steps of the addiction process. Collaborate with a private psychologist, because as I said earlier, it is important to combine medication and medical advice with also therapy, because most of the time this is going together, and most of the time there is something related underlying emotional difficulty, stress, and everything that can be helped by a psychologist. And also think, why not, about a cessation program or specialized center. So in Western countries, it is very much, we are very much aware about specialized centers. But there is also one in UAE that is called National Rehabilitation Center. And that is used now instead of deportation. Because for a long period of time, UAE was just deporting people that was involved in drug in a way or another. And now, instead of just deporting, they're trying to help them with rehabilitation and shifting deportation from punishment to rehabilitation to help. So it's possible, and they have a website with a lot of info on it, and they're giving also workshop and training for a professional, which is really important and helpful to understand how things are going. So when you refer, and you can keep an eye on what's going on. So you have referred to the medical staff, you have referred to a private psychologist. You need to keep an eye on the evolution. Is it working? Is the student is involved in this therapy? Is it something that is done properly? Is the family as a good implication? Is the family trying to help also, as sending him to the appointments? You see all of that. And also collaborate with other medical professionals, because of course, when the school and the medical professionals that are around the student are collaborating, is getting a better effect, because it's getting there is more communication, more info, and that can only be helpful for him than just being, all apart. So this is important to keep an eye on it, so you can, what is going on, and that without stepping in too much in the privacy of the student and his family, you can see if the things is getting better. Yeah, I think the time is running. So important to know also, it's regarding the trends. Stay informed is one of the key, because there is always a new trend in drugs and in substance. So the better you know about the trends, the better it is to target intervention. So as you see in this article, they were talking about a new type of substance abuse, that is a classic A4 paper that is soaked in drugs, and then you smoke it. So if you took your paper and you roll it and you smoke it, but it's already been soaked in drug by a drug dealer abroad, and so they send it as a notepad normally, and you just take it off, you roll it, and you smoke it. So it is really also damaging. So it's important to keep an eye on what is getting trendy. And also in research, because research will always help to understand what is already been done, and what can be done to help people with addiction, and understand also what is an addiction. Is it too much? Is it normal? Etc. And of course, promote awareness and prevention is for students, for teachers, and also for parents, because they all need to know what is abuse, what is normal, what is not normal, what is the consequences. The parents need to be involved in that. They need to be aware that it's not just about what they know. It's not just about alcohol and cannabis and cigarettes. There is also other types of things, and they need to be aware, because they need to keep an eye on what's going on at home. So at school, it's better. And battle the myth about addiction, especially for students, teacher, and parents, to understand that it's not just about the willing. It's not the willing of stopping. It's not just about that. It's also about every physiological difficulty that are underlying the use of the substance. So to sum up, what we need to understand is that it's really frequent. It's not just about classic drugs. It's always the substance abuse is triggered by a growing brain that is rewiring at the moment when the first exposure, and when it's getting rewired, it's trigger differences in the development of the brain. And that can lead to serious consequences, such as addiction, but also brain development and overall health damage. But that can be treated, and that can be treated by the help of several interventions, as I said, medical, psychological, and etc., and also with the support of school. So yeah, that's what I can say for teen addictions. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for being here. I think that many of the participants felt it very useful. It was really in-depth, and thank you very much for bringing it to a level that it's understandable by everybody, Dr. Rekha. And I'm sure that you will have parents reaching out, because it's I can tell you, because I'm representing a huge group, and I can see that we are really facing a lot of difficulties, and parents who are reaching out, we are sharing your details so that they can understand, because not all psychologists are aware of this, and this is why it's important that we send them to the right people. And that's one other thing that as a school we need to understand, and we need to grow our numbers of referrals and about clinicians. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Your presentation was so clear that there are no questions. There were one or two, but Miss Susie answered them. So again, thank you so much. We will share our recording through our YouTube channel, and we'll share it out through all of our WhatsApp groups and on LinkedIn. So please do follow Susie and myself for updates, and of course, Dr. Rekha. And thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next month, where we will be focusing back on schools and on inclusive practice. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rekha.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.